few responses to some of the things that have been raised here. First of all, I really do still feel that it's worth looking at this concept of a state of emergency, because it doesn't just deal with foreclosures. It deals with anything. And in the early 90s, when they eliminated general assistance, which was a very meager welfare benefit for single adults in Michigan, they eliminated the whole benefit. We looked at it back then, and we recognized that really what it was a rent check. And we did a campaign back then for a moratorium on evictions, really under the same conception, state of emergency, moratorium on evictions. And so, and our conception of that, just in response to what the sister said, it's not lobbying. I mean, we're not into lobbying the politicians, because you said we're never going to out-lobby the banks, you know, they have all the money. But more it's this conception of empowering people with the idea that they have the right to do this, you know. And that in this country still there's a lot of belief in legality, you know. Most of us don't believe much in it, but there is that belief. And when you can phrase a demand that in essence is challenging the property rights of the system in terms that seem popular, mild, and even legal, it's an empowering thing. Because people will fight for what they believe they have a right to fight for. And that's really our conception of a state of emergency and a moratorium. It's not to ask the governor to do it, but it's to essentially empower people with the sense that they have the right to it and to fight it. In terms of what was said, and obviously any groups that are involved in this, we get tons of calls for service stuff, and because people, their first interest is what do you do? One of the things that I think in the moratorium eviction campaign that we did is we used to have a flyer that on the one side was the call for the moratorium, and on the other side is what do you do if the landlord tries to evict you? And we used to, at one time we passed out, I think 80,000 of them from sound cards. And we started finding that people would start coming up to us and saying that, gee, you know, I used your flyer and confronted my landlord in asserting my rights. I think it's something that can be done, is to mass distribute literature that combines the political approach with the legal, with your rights. So it isn't a question of people just coming to us, but us going to them to educate them. And I think that's another approach. I want to say a word on the squatting question. It's an interesting one. I actually won a legal case against HUD when a woman took over a HUD home and occupied the home, put $5,000 of their own money in the home. They got ready to evict her. We went to court, and of course they said, this was terrible, this was a squatter. And I said, they should be thanking her. She kept another home from being vandalized and empty. And you know, we won. We won the case. And I think because especially so many of the homes now, especially by the eviction stage, are actually owned by the federal government. It's a kind of persuasive argument. You know, why should the government empty out homes instead of maintaining people, and why shouldn't the government be working with communities to reoccupy the homes in a real way instead of dumping them to investors at the expense of the people? And I think we should keep this in mind. I think this conception of the federalization, really, of the home industry, of the mortgage industry, gives us a lot of power, you know, to challenge the government more directly, both for subsidizing the banks and not subsidizing the people. Unfortunately, what the government's pattern is, for example, Michigan got $150 million of this emergency, $1.5 billion grant that Obama proposed. So what we raised is, well, look, and here's what you can do with that money. Take all that money, keep people in their home, put a moratorium on evictions, and use that money to set up like a nonprofit to fund where people can rebuy their homes at the real value of the homes, which in Detroit we could have saved tens of thousands of homes for $50 million, and let them stay. And you know what the response of the government was? Oh, no, the money has to go directly to the banks. That was their answer, Treasury and the state. So that's what we're up against. But from a conceptual and political standpoint, I think we're in a stronger position to challenge that this subsidy is continuing to the banks at the expense of the people. And why the hell is the government, which has all these promoted, I keep saying, where these pass these bills to promote people staying in their homes, in fact doing the opposite? I think it's an important concept. the other thing in terms of national networking, we find sometimes we might have a servicer that doesn't have an office in Detroit. They have an office in Akron, for example. We had trouble finding who to pick it because Akron's in West Palm Beach. And I think having a national network, I think it's just the neatest thing. Man, if somebody at a bank that has a headquarters in Miami gets picketed to defend the home in Detroit, ooh, that would freak the hell out of them. And I think national network can be very important because we can then target these banks for wherever it's hitting, and we can show that, yeah, people hearing about this all over the country, and we're ready to back each other up. And I think it would be a boost to everybody. So I think we're certainly interested in doing it. We have a very good website. It's Moratorium-NOW. And just the last thing that what the sister said, we've actually found in Detroit, there's a lot more working together than there ever. When we move people in, we'll have people from 6 or 7 groups doing it, because we're all so hard hit now. It's like, gee, fashionalism kind of goes down over disaster, and we're all fighting for survival. So I think that we're finding there's a lot more coming together across ideological, across political ground. We may still have those differences, but in the street we can come together.
I just want to make a quick comment. When we work with the tenants in these large apartments, first of all, most people have never done anything political in their life. And when we empowered them to let them know they had rights and went and found these service agencies that were willing to work with people, unless you stay with them, you're going to lose them. They don't know how to organize. So when somebody said, well, how do we keep, I think he was talking about the neighbors to stand before and to fight back and to be there for the person that's being put out. Well, first of all, they got to know that they can do that. And they have to know that it's an organization or somebody that's willing to work with them and not just leave them on their own. So in order to get tenant councils and people in apartment buildings to fight on their behalf and to continue it and continue the process, the organization that took the lead can't abandon them until it's set. And so if you're not willing to provide that kind of time, then that's a problem. Because those people have to be cultivated and have to be trained to understand what their rights are, what organizations to contact when something happens, and the very fact that they can stand and not be concerned about this. Somebody brought up the police. Well, the police here in Detroit is very repressive. And they will come out and discourage people who don't have a whole lot of history of standing up for themselves or standing up for their rights. They'll abandon the idea right away when the police show up. They will allow the police to disperse them. And so I'm saying the organizations have they have to have a commitment and have a responsibility. If you're going to empower people in the community, you can't abandon them. You can't show up one day when somebody getting ready to get thrown out and then they'll never see you again. You have to have a real relationship with people. It's again a relationship that's important. If you don't have relationships with people, none of the stuff is going to work. And so you have to establish a relationship with the people in the community. How do you do that? By going to the community, talking to people, working with people, being around them, getting to know them, and then they will stand up. They will if you're not there. They'll stand on your shoulders to fight for their rights once they see that there is an organization or a group of people who really do care enough that have the facts, that have a little power. Jerry is a lawyer, got a lot of power. In the community, people say, I can call Jerry. They'll stand there till Jerry comes. Or they'll call Jerry and say, Jerry, what should I do now? But if you go 1 or 2 times and you help the people and it's a victory just for that day. It's not a victory for the community and the people. You have to develop a real relationship with them.